Arriving in a new town known as Uncanny Valley, the protagonist of the game is happy that she can finally start her new independent life, having a place of her own and being accepted as a gas station store assistant. That's when she becomes targeted by a strange man who introduces himself as #1 realtor of the town, persistently urging the protagonist to view one of his houses, being specific for her needs. Hi folks, I'm R, your narrator, and welcome to House Hunted, a game that is seemingly the prequel of the John Doe game. Keep in mind that this video will have spoilers of both of the games, and with that said, let's begin. Created by the same dev who made John Doe, we learn how Yu, the protagonist of the game, came to the town known as the Uncanny Valley, where she became a target of John Doe and the bizarre and terrifying events she faced. The background and surroundings are just as distorted and surreal, depicting how this is not a typical town, despite Yu not batting an eye and finding it completely normal. Yu is new to the town, trying to start a new life, having been accepted to work at a gas station and found an affordable apartment, finally able to be independent. Getting off the bus, Yu reads the local map, deciding on what to do next, whether to head straight to the apartment, explore the town, or go to a cafe to unwind. Deciding on any of those choices always leads to the same outcome, with Yu encountering a tall, older bizarre man called Mason Tallow, who introduces himself as the #1 realtor in the entire Uncanny Valley. Despite Yu constantly telling Mason that she is not looking to buy a house and that she is moving into her apartment today, Mason keeps hassling her about a perfect house that he has in mind for her. Not being able to shake him off, Yu accepts a business card from him, which only then makes him leave, with Yu getting a really bad feeling about him, especially as it seems like he disappeared in thin air, rather than having normal pacing while walking. As Yu slowly forgets about this strange encounter, she enters the apartment complex just to face a locked apartment door, which makes her start feeling nervous as she was informed her apartment would be ready today. She quickly takes her phone out and dials the apartment company, who inform her that they have an issue which they do not explain the nature of, forcing them to postpone the handover date to the next day. Yu, reasonably being frustrated, persists that she moved here with all of her stuff as today was agreed upon, and that the company didn't give her any prior notices that today wouldn't work, which makes an unapologetic agency just repeat that they have an issue without any elaboration. A defeated Yu, not knowing what else to do, thanks the company who hung up the phone on her, being left with the only choice to find a place to crash until the apartment becomes ready. There are a total of 4 endings, with 2 leaving Yu alive and 2 leaving her very dead. The first ending that I personally got is Doe-Eyed Yu, which is seemingly the canon ending leading to the sequel, John Doe, where Yu becomes targeted by John. As Yu proceeds to walk downtown to find a hotel, being extremely tired and unfamiliar with this town, a familiar voice is heard before she gets jumped by Mason appearing right before her, going on his strange remarks that Yu is lonely and lost and still she didn't call him, giving off red flags left and right of what a manipulative and sociopathic person he is. When asked if he was following her, he simply goes on his nonsensical and arrogant monologue that he is simply the #1 realtor in Uncanny Valley. Despite Yu repeating that she is looking for a hotel, Mason seems confused, finding it difficult to process what she's saying. Mason's persistence in showing Yu a house gives her the creeps, knowing something is definitely wrong with Mason stalking her. But as she is unsure where to find a hotel and considers if she can even afford one, Mason utters a very convincing line that if Yu accompanies him to the house and doesn't absolutely fall in love with it after seeing it, he would personally cover her costs for the hotel. Yu, uncertain yet intrigued, accepts this deal as what would she have to lose. In the worst case scenario, she would see a nice house, kill some time, and eventually go to a hotel where her costs will be covered. Just before setting on her way, Mason utters even more concerning lines that this 2-garage domicile is starving to meet her, which makes her question her decision in visiting the house, but regardless, feels the compulsion of going. As they walk in silence and finally reach the property in question, Yu is astonished to the size and look of the house, knowing for sure someone like her would never be able to afford something like that. Studying Mason without saying much, trying to understand him, she asks what's the catch and why she's so persistent on specifically showing her the house, which she simply dodges by saying that she would love the insides of the house, fidgeting and twitching in an unnatural manner as if barely managing to hold himself from explosive excitement. Yu, becoming really concerned to what might await her inside this large beautiful house, listens to her guts and decides to leave, not wanting to listen to another word from Mason. She finds the courage shaking her nervous feeling to finally speak up, saying in the most polite way that she doesn't want to lead him on for a sale that she's not interested in at all and that she wants to leave. As she speaks the last word, Mason's expression suddenly drops to a heavy frown, which makes Yu even more uncomfortable than before. Waiting in silence for a response, Mason just glares at Yu as if she is his enemy, making Yu feel the urge to reason with her decision even though it's her right. As she tries to say she's sorry and she's leaving, Mason steps back slowly into the house, not losing eye contact with Yu, finally getting into the house, which emits a loud growl, making Yu have shivers run down her spine, walking away as fast as she can. After Yu finds herself back to the populated city what feels like hours, she's jumped hearing her phone ring, which is from the apartment company who inform her that their apartment is ready now as they have managed to solve their little issue which they do not want to explain. They end this conversation by a strange tagline that they guarantee realtor-free service since 1992. As if having realtors in the uncanny valley is a bad thing, something to be avoided, and the lack of something that actually sells the properties. It all starts making you feel even more strange and terrified, remembering Mason who kept on saying that she's new in town, alone and lost, as if he was specifically preying on her, knowing that a local wouldn't fall for his tricks. Maybe tricks of all realtors in the city. Maybe that's why the apartment company is proud of announcing that they are realtor-free. Being extremely confused and terrified to what could have happened to her if she went inside the house, Yu sets her priorities ahead of her, heading back to the apartment complex. Just as Yu nears her apartment complex, a very familiar face is seen, being no other than John Doe, who instantly becomes infatuated with Yu as soon as he sees her, blushing and having wide opened eyes, which leads to the sequel where Yu becomes targeted by John. This reveals how John encountering Yu in the bus and her workplace at the gas station was not a coincidence, but in fact, John had been stalking and following her ever since he suddenly saw her in the street, following her to her apartment, studying her journey to work, and finally confronting her at a gas station. The other alternative alive ending is when Yu calls Mason after she notices her apartment door is locked, but as he starts uttering those strange and creepy lines, Yu changes her mind to go to the house viewing with him, deciding to go back on her search to find a hotel. This leads to her also ending up alive, managing to go to her apartment the day after, starting her first shift as a gas station store attendee, having a far worse fate, meeting a supernatural John Doe who can shapeshift, manipulate the environment, and trap you in a never-ending loop. On the other hand, if Yu decides to call Mason and go inside the house, accepting his offer, one of the first things she notices apart from the beautiful interior design is the humidity and warmth. As Mason keeps smiling in a menacing manner, Yu starts feeling nauseous, losing her footing, and starts to stumble down. As she tries to hold herself up, holding onto the sofa, she notices how soft it is, as if resembling the texture and feeling of skin or even meat, ending up with her slipping and falling onto the sofa. That's when the entire house changes into a red, meaty color, as if depicting the inside of a digestive tract. That's when Mason starts unveiling the true nature of his invitation to the house. He reveals how it's a shame Yu has to be eaten now, as unlike others, she was fun to chat with. He also expands on why he's the #1 realtor in Uncanny Valley, as he's been doing this for a long time and has more experience than the others like him. He continues how Yu is new to town and she's lucky to have met Mason first, as everyone else in this town hates explaining things, which rings a bell even with the apartment company who didn't explain what their little issue was. He unveils that the other realtors have adapted barbaric behaviors of just consuming and snatching people in the street, unlike Mason, who only wants the finest buyers to incorporate in his portfolio. This makes a lot of sense why the apartment company had this strange tagline of being realtor-free, as they, unlike the other agencies who have realtors in the town, actually offered real apartments and not hive-mind organisms that consumed humans. That's when Mason crawls out of his disguise, which is the human skin, joining the entirety of the organism which was disguised as a house, explaining how this attractive disguise, the suit or the skin of Mason, has made it much easier to lure prey here for consumption. Mason ends his menacing monologue thanking you for joining him and becoming part of him when she goes into a deep sleep when everything goes to black. An alternate bad ending is when Yu doesn't call Mason but eventually agrees to go inside the house. As Yu enters the house, Mason is not as gentle as before and doesn't thank her, but instead attacks her and quickly consumes her, mentioning that his value will skyrocket with her, as if Yu has some sort of unrealized sentimental value. Therefore, it's depicted that the realtors in Uncanny Valley are all monsters who are disguised as houses, having a suit of disguise, looking like humans, luring their targets into the house and consuming them. That is why Mason specifically targeted Yu, as she was new in town and wasn't familiar with what the realtors are in the city, monsters that consume people. That explains why the apartment company guaranteed no realtors. The background is also similarly distorted as it was in John Doe game, revealing that it's not just a fluke or an unintentional feature. The background depicts the surreal nature of the city, where everything and everyone possesses some supernatural abilities, manipulating the world and others. The background in a way seems to be AI generated, which goes hand in hand with what we learn in the John Doe game. In there, the world changes into a normal shape, but only as a way of deception for you to fall in love with John Doe. John Doe breaks the fourth wall at times as well, depicting how they are all stuck in a virtual realm, being given their corresponding duties and personalities, and all that for the entertainment of the players. Therefore, you arriving at this town and joining these characters, she slowly becomes entangled with them, becoming part of the game, whether as part of Mason, a victim to a monster, or a significant other to John Doe, who instantly falls in love with her, repeating the same loop over and over again until she falls right into her part, playing her role as the partner of John Doe. That's it for the end of this video, folks. I might make a separate video diving much deeper into the universe of these games. If you enjoyed it, you can stay tuned for more by hitting on the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been your host Star. Until the next video, have a fantastic day.